You won't believe this cheating. Daniel crashed into the house and witnessed the shocking scene. His wife plus lover equals the most devastating scene of his life. Court, revenge, betrayal, and then he discovered a shocking secret about her. You won't believe how it ended. You just won't. Click now, or you'll miss the biggest reveal.
Chapter 3: When Hearts Break in Parallel, a true story of betrayal and redemption. Attention! Have you ever felt your entire world collapse in an instant? Today, I'm sharing a story that might feel painfully familiar to many of you. As we continue our journey into the deepest secrets of relationships that stand the test of time, let's explore how two different support systems can completely change how we heal from betrayal. While Mark's world was crumbling around him, as we saw in our previous episode, a strikingly similar tragedy was unfolding in the life of 33-year-old Daniel in New York. I want you to imagine this. Like Mark, Daniel's marriage had been his sanctuary, his safe harbor in life's storms, but everything changed the moment he discovered his wife's shocking betrayal, a moment that would forever alter his path. Daniel had given his heart and soul to his wife, Emily, for over a decade. They had built what seemed like a perfect life together, a beautiful home in the suburbs, family dinners every Sunday, and a stepdaughter, Lily, whom Daniel had come to love as if she were his own flesh and blood. His family wasn't just important, they were the very center of his universe, a place where he could finally breathe after long days as a high-powered corporate attorney. "I always thought we had the kind of love that could weather any storm," Daniel later confessed to me, his voice breaking with emotion. "I never once imagined she could betray me like this." But ladies, you know how life sometimes delivers those moments that split our existence into before and after. For Daniel, that moment came on a warm Tuesday evening when he returned home early, his heart full of excitement about surprising Emily with a romantic dinner, something they hadn't done in months. As he approached their bedroom, carrying Emily's favorite flowers, he heard something that made his blood run cold. Hushed voices and the unmistakable sounds of passion coming from behind their bedroom door. Have you ever had that moment where your body knows the truth before your mind is ready to accept it? Hidden treasure. Pushing the door open with trembling hands, Daniel faced a sight that would haunt his dreams for years to come: his wife, Emily, tangled in an intimate embrace with none other than Lily's father, a man Daniel had welcomed into their home countless times, someone he had considered a friend. "Emily, what is this?" Daniel's voice barely escaped his throat, his entire body frozen in disbelief. The look on their faces, guilt mixed with fear, told him everything he needed to know. As they scrambled to cover themselves, stumbling over explanations and excuses, Daniel couldn't even process their words. All he could focus on was the shattering of everything he believed in, the trust he had placed in his wife now lying in pieces at his feet. This is where Daniel's story takes a dramatically different turn from Mark's experience. While Mark faced his betrayal alone, with his own family turning against him, as many of you shared in your comments on our last video, Daniel found himself surrounded by unwavering support. "My parents and siblings became my lifeline," Daniel shared. "When everything else was falling apart, they refused to let me drown in my pain." As news of Emily's infidelity spread, Daniel's family rallied around him without hesitation. His father, a man of few words, simply said, "We're here for you, son. You don't have to go through this alone." And in those simple words, Daniel found the strength to face what was coming. For many beautiful women experiencing loneliness after betrayal, this kind of family support can make all the difference between healing and spiraling into depression. The emotional toll of discovering infidelity can be overwhelming, especially in long-term marriages, but having people who believe in you can change everything. In the days and weeks that followed, Daniel's family became his foundation. They took turns staying with him, ensuring he ate and slept. They accompanied him to divorce proceedings, offering both emotional support and practical advice as he navigated the complex legal landscape of ending his marriage. "My sister Olivia would remind me daily, Emily's actions are not a reflection of your worth. You deserve so much better," Daniel recalled, his eyes filling with tears of gratitude. Those words became my mantra on the darkest days. How many of you have been there, needing someone to remind you of your worth when betrayal makes you question everything? Share your experience in the comments below. As the final divorce hearing approached, Daniel prepared himself mentally and emotionally. He knew Emily and her lover would likely use every trick possible to gain advantage, but with his family beside him, he found the courage to stand firm and fight for the truth. Walking into that courtroom, Daniel felt a strange calm wash over him. When Emily entered with her affair partner, he felt anger rise within him, but unlike before, he could control it now. He wasn't there for revenge, he was there to reclaim his future and his dignity. The proceedings were intense and emotionally charged, exactly like many of you have described in your own divorce experiences after discovering secrets in your marriage. Each testimony felt like reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. But Daniel remained focused on the ultimate goal, freedom from betrayal and a chance to start again. When the judge finally delivered the verdict, validating the infidelity claims and ruling largely in Daniel's favor, the relief was overwhelming. The journey had been excruciating, but in that moment, Daniel felt the first real stirrings of hope. I remember walking out of that courtroom feeling like I could breathe again for the first time in months, he told me. The betrayal still hurt, but I wasn't defined by it anymore. This is such a crucial message for anyone going through similar pain, whether you're rebuilding after discovering your partner's secret romance or trying to reclaim your identity after years of dedicated marriage. The path to healing isn't about forgetting what happened, it's about refusing to let it determine your future. In the months that followed, Daniel gradually rediscovered joy in the small things: quiet evenings with a good book, Sunday brunches with his sister, the satisfaction of winning a difficult case at work. He began rebuilding his life piece by piece, creating a new normal that wasn't shadowed by betrayal. Then came a twist that tested his healing in unexpected ways. Daniel learned that Emily's lover had gotten another woman pregnant and abandoned Emily completely, leaving her to face the consequences of their affair alone. My first reaction was vindication, Daniel admitted. A part of me wanted to celebrate that karma had caught up with them. But as the initial satisfaction faded, Daniel found himself experiencing something unexpected: compassion. Not enough to welcome Emily back into his life, but enough to recognize that the cycle of pain needed to end somewhere. I realized that holding on to hatred was only hurting me, he explained. Letting go wasn't about forgiving what they did, it was about freeing myself from the burden of carrying that anger forever. How to bring passion back into your life after betrayal is one of the most common questions I receive from wonderful women in Texas and California who follow our channel. Daniel's journey offers a powerful template. Rebuilding doesn't mean erasing the past, but rather creating something new that honors your growth through pain. With each passing day, Daniel found himself growing stronger, more resilient, and increasingly optimistic about his future. The betrayal had broken him, but in rebuilding, he discovered parts of himself he never knew existed: strength, resilience, and the capacity for joy even after devastating loss. If I could tell your viewers one thing, Daniel said as we concluded our interview, it's that surviving betrayal is possible. Not just surviving, but eventually thriving. The path isn't linear, there are good days and terrible ones, but with the right support, you can emerge from this stronger than you ever imagined. And that, my dear friends, is perhaps the most important secret about relationships and betrayal. Our healing often depends less on what happened to us and more on who stands beside us as we rebuild. In our next episode, I'll be sharing Sophia's incredible story of how she reignited passion in her marriage when everything seemed lost. You won't believe the simple technique that saved her long-term relationship from divorce. Until then, remember that you are never alone in your journey. Our community of beautiful women stands with you, just as Daniel's family stood with him. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to look for our special, secret code, hidden somewhere in next week's video.
I drift in your shadow, your breath keeps me still. The night wraps around us, bends time to my will. In dreams we are endless, no space in between. A place made of whispers where silence can sing. Take me to sleep where the stars never end. Lost in the rhythm, we don't have to pretend. Floating in waves where the night will defend. Take me to sleep where the stars never end. Hands, 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 hands. Every beat pulls me deeper inside. Your touch is a current, a velvet tide. Oh, wake me now, let this feeling abide. In your arms, I'm forever